Welcome back to How Soccer Explains Leadership. Thank you so much for being a part of this show. As always, I am very, very glad that you get to be a part of the conversation I'm about to have. Today with me is Evan Dabby with the New Jersey Youth Soccer. He is the executive director. And, you know, as usual, I have no doubt Paul would love to be a part of this conversation as well. But he's getting ready to start doing some interviews with us, but we're not quite there yet. We will be there soon. So get ready for those. But today, as I said, we have this conversation. If you want to connect with us afterwards, if you have some thoughts, if you have some questions, if you have some feedback, also, if you have any guests that you think would be good for the show, please reach out to me, Phil at howsoccerexplainsleadership.com. You can also join us on the Facebook group, How Soccer Explains Leadership. So without more from me right now, we're going to get right to it with Evan. Evan, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me this afternoon. I know morning for you, but either way, we're here.
That's exactly right. Yeah, no, I'm excited for this. We had a brief conversation before. We have some mutual friends, so I'm excited to get to know you better. I'm excited for the audience to get to know you better and all the good things that are going on out there in New Jersey. So, before we get into some of those things, can you share your story, how you developed your passion for soccer and leadership, and really your journey to New Jersey Youth Soccer?
Sure. I grew up playing soccer. It was really more seasonal at that point. Played 3 sports in high school, and as you get older, you tend to focus a little bit more. And soccer was that for me. Became the primary sport for me, and had the opportunity to play in college at Tufts University, and 4 great years there. That tons of stories and memories and friendships, and that became my network, both socially, but also professionally. I did, camps in the summer, and you start to meet people. And I created my own soccer clinic in my hometown and learned a little bit about leadership with kids. And in that endeavor, that was a fun time over the summer. And when it came time to look for my first job, I utilized that network. And ironically, it was our team manager from the high school soccer team, a woman, Carrie Goldberg, who's out in California and an agent representing professional athletes. And she helped me get my first full job. She got me the interview, and that was at Major League Soccer. Managed to survive a really awesome and exciting 16-season journey at MLS before landing in my current role at New Jersey Youth Soccer as the executive director. So right there, I guess, is 30 plus years wrapped up into a minute or two.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I love about that is something I remember my mom would always tell me, and I've told so many people since, it's you never know who knows. Yeah. Right. And so I love the team manager comes out with these great connections, and there you are. So, I mean, and that's something, a great lesson for all of us. I remember a few episodes ago, Phil Smith, we talked about take the meeting, right? Just, you never know what might come from a call, what might come from a meeting. So absolutely love that. When I hear stories like that, where it's just folks out there, if you're not really kind of mining the people you already know, that's just a great leadership lesson in itself. So with that, what is your personal why? What is your kind of your life purpose, and how are you living it out each day?
So that question about your why, it's something that I started thinking about after hearing a woman, Amanda Vandervert, who's would be a great guest if you haven't had her, and does amazing things. Met her at MLS, and now back in professional soccer on the women's side. And she spoke at a USU soccer conference about her why. And, candidly, it wasn't something that I had thought about a ton prior to that. And, when I did think about it, mine may be overly simple, but, you are who you are. And I find myself every day, it's about just making things better. I get, satisfaction out of fixing a problem, big or small, finding solutions. And, I'll point to an example, the things that motivate me. We wanted to create a goal safety video at New Jersey Youth Soccer, and at MLS, I was involved in creating the first ever concussion education video, and I learned how incredibly demanding it is to create a video of any sort. When we take back to this project, I also know that goal safety is goal safety. You're in New Jersey, you're in California, it's still about anchoring goals and all those basic things. But it's important, and for context, we want to do this because in youth soccer, there's just one injury is too much, one death is too much. And that's kind of unfortunately something that happens too often when in kids getting injured or killed. So that was the initiative. Fast forward, and I had the audacity perhaps to think a little differently and engage the state associations across the country in this project. So what we did was we created a video that was generic at its core. The front end and the back end, had branding opportunities, but the idea of goal safety again is similar. So the why part, and this is the simple things that really motivate me. We created 20 state associations joined. We completed the project, and for these other state associations, it saved them what I would estimate 90% of their time and their expense because it was this aggregated project. So those types of things are solutions that really get me motivated. At home, maybe it's something far more simple, a dry erase board with after school chores and responsibilities so my kids can be more independent, or not hear me and my wife constantly remind them what needs to get done. But it is little solutions. It's simple. I think I have that systematic, practical approach that works for me and gets my brain going each and every day. I think it falls shy of driving my wife nuts. She might answer that differently. But I still realize how much I'm learning about myself in this new job compared to my last job. And, I joke about it, but, that's kind of a skill set that I think I have. It's a strength of mine, just constant progress, constant improvement, step by step.
Yeah, and that's something folks who listen to this show know that my why is to help others flourish and make good things better. So it is simple, right? And that's I think the simpler, it's the better really for your why. First of all, because you can remember it, because if it's too long, you're not going to remember it. But also just because it's a great filter, right? For everything that you're doing. How are you making that better? What does that look like? And I think that's come into, and it's very apparent in what I've seen, the little, the research I've done for this interview, and just seeing what New Jersey Youth Soccer is doing, and some of the things, initiatives that you already have been a part of and are going to be continuing, presumably. By the way, Amanda is still, we've had conversations about getting her on. So yeah, we're on the same page there too. So I'm looking forward to that conversation when we're able to be able to have it. So Amanda,
track her down.
Exactly. If you listen to this, see, Evan said you got to do it too. So, so I know she's a little busy right now, but that's all right. We'll get her on. We'll get her on one of these days. So, all right. So let's take that and say, with that, as you're coming into New Jersey Youth Soccer, right? And your why is to make things better. So what does that look like? What are the mission, vision, values you have for New Jersey Youth Soccer? What's going really well? What do you hope to change, and what do you hope it will look like in 10 years? So that's a conversation we can have for a little bit here. Yeah.
So vision and mission was something that we developed not too long ago. It didn't exist coming into this job, and a credit to our recent board of directors. There's been some really impressive stuff that our leadership, our board of directors have done. Strategic planning, and born out of that was, those things. Our vision is, simple as it should be, to provide fun and safe soccer experiences at all ages and abilities for our youth soccer community. And those of us who've been involved that know that simple sentence takes a lot of work to get to there. Mm-hmm. But that's what we are. And the fun part's easy. We put on 4v4 festivals. We, create an after school soccer program. We partner with Topps Trading Cards to create a custom card for the kids that win the state championship, and something they bring home. So, there's a lot that goes on there. The safe part is at least as important. It's certainly less fun, but in recent years, and I think it really stems as a core, history, the USA gymnastic tragedies and safe sport and protecting youth from sexual abuse. It's just a massive burden. It's a massive responsibility for those of us in youth sports, and youth soccer is no different. And it's educating, it's the training, it's the enforcement, it's dealing with investigations when there's questions of wrongdoing. So it's the opposite end of the fun, but I do take personal pride when that you have some role in making it safe and creating an environment that's better for kids that should never have to endure anything of that sort. So that's a little bit about our mission and vision.
Yeah, and so I love just hearing that part. And it's because we often think about every job, right, has parts that are fun and that we, can just wake up and go, yes, I get to do this today. And, those other things, it's a matter of how can we, see the value of it on the other side of it, which does make it a lot easier to get up and say, yes, I get to do these things today. Right. Because we know that on the other side of that, there are people that are mentally healthier. There are people that are safer physically. Right. Those are things that you're able to do, but it's not necessarily something you go, yeah, this is super fun to go through all these regulations and rules and all these other things, but it's all part of the job. So, there is no perfect job out there to, spoiler alert. But I think we can really take a step back and go, all right, this is what really gets us going. So what are some of those things that are going really well that you would say, these are some of the things that I just get really excited to tell people about. These are the things that are the initiatives or the things that we want to just keep that foot on the pedal and knowing that we're doing it well, and how can we re-engineer this over and over?
So, in maybe their last year or two, started talking about, and takes a while to get comfortable in this role, far longer than I would have thought, but hindsight is what it is. And focus more on culture. And I want to give credit to a gentleman, Roy Scolario. He was the president of the board and really, was part of the decision to give me this shot. In hindsight, he took a big risk. I was new to youth soccer. I was in professional soccer, but really very different scene. I without putting words in his mouth, I think he maybe saw what he wanted New Jersey youth soccer to become in what was a shifting landscape. He took a risk, and I want to also credit, she tragically passed away recently, but our past president, Evelyn Gill, who got the chance to work with for 4 years, and just an unbelievable impression she also left on me in their 4 years as president. And I think through all of that, in our current board that also deserves the credit, we transitioned from what I would like to consider a governing and rule enforcement entity to a member service driven association. And, what I point to in trying to explain it is the relatively recent COVID pandemic. So the return to play, for soccer and everybody getting back to life, the guidelines, the timelines, what can you do? What can't you do? It was a mammoth task, and this was all state driven. So, our clubs looked to us to say, what do we do and when and how? So overnight, so to speak, we became the source of information and guidance. Our staff, to their credit, embraced the challenge. We created videos, we created templates, we created policies. It was all about getting kids back. And that was just something we were kind of thrown into the mix without ever having been able to plan for it. We hosted webinars almost weekly when it first came out. And so, that really, what I think drove is the recent evolution of how we're viewed, and go from, hey, you're punished, you did wrong, here's what you get, to how can we help you? And Safe Sport's another one of those examples. And that culture, and that shift is something something as much as anything, as much as any individual program, I think is something we should be really proud of and build on, because that's what our role is. And, I hope 10 years from now, I can have, dozens more examples of that shift and creating a better culture. And we may get to it as part of the other questions, but, it's a competitive marketplace, and, there's a place for competition on the field, but, we want a culture where off the field, it's about building the game and growing it and making it fun and safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And just take a step back real quick, just to help the audience understand the breadth of what we're talking about with New Jersey Youth Soccer. This is rec to competitive, all of it, right?
Yeah. So our membership has grown. Recent update, we exceeded the 100,000 member point again. We had a dip with COVID, so a lot of growth in the last few years. So there's, it's approximately 50 plus thousand rec players and 50,000 plus competitive players. There's also, many hundreds of players registered through Top Soccer, which is our program for players with special needs, something that we're immensely proud of and supported greatly by RWJ Barnabas Health. And we also have ODP, the other end of the spectrum that, with a state team, regional identification, national identification. So, we feel it's pretty wide ranging in what the services we want to offer to kids at any level.
Yeah. So there's a few things going on that are on your plate there. So, and which is also why you have the ability to talk to so many different things and speak to so many different things. So with that, what's going well? What's the other side of that? What are some things that you hope to change about really, New Jersey youth soccer and youth soccer really in America as it currently exists?
So we're certainly in New Jersey, and I think it goes beyond New Jersey. We've seen a dip in the women's game and participation rather. So that's been a focus to try to address that. We had the luxury of create a grant from the Northeast Women's Soccer Foundation, which is something that was originated from the Women's World Cup. So we're putting that money to use, and we created this G3, Growing the Girls Game. And it has a really wide range of initiatives. So there's an internship opportunity for girls. There's coaching education, women's and girls in soccer, WAGs, sponsored a grassroots referee course, C license, and other. I mean, their support has just been tremendous to give these women that want to be referees or coaches the opportunity and fund all of those course costs. We have a 4v4 event that we'll introduce. We did webinars about leadership and women in leadership. So Yale Averbush West, Heather Mitz, Amanda Vandervoort comes back, as well as Sky Bruce. So we had these incredible women educate and try to inspire the next generation. So we hope, and it's just year one. We fully believe that that's something that we can replicate and build in years to come, and hopefully, better support the women's game. Last thing I'd say on that, the leadership at Gotham FC we're really realize how lucky we are to have a women's professional team, and excited about what they're doing, and try to figure out how to grow together.
So what does success look like that in 10 years? What do you hope that with that G3 initiative will come out of that? What's the goal? What's the hope? What are we looking for? I have 3 girls, and I coach high school girls, and so I have a huge heart for this as well. So what are you hoping for as far as what to come out of all of these things that you're doing with the initiative?
Yeah, at a basic level, it's participation. Just see that there's more women and girls both playing and coaching and refereeing. So, imagine we might talk about it, but I know that soccer gave me a lot. And we talked about my story from friendships to a profession. And it's not to suggest that soccer will be that for everyone. We know that's not realistic, but for everybody who give them a chance to get as much as they want out of the game. So I think at the core of it, we'll measure success in large part by seeing the numbers of women and girls in those roles.
Yeah, and not just at the beginning, because I think that there are a lot of girls that play early on, but continuing and retention throughout, because I think that's what we see. I know I have, where the girls just dwindle as the ages get higher and higher. It's harder and harder to keep the girls on even the best teams. And honestly, sometimes the best teams are the most toxic. And so with girls, especially, they're like, no, thank you, and quite frankly, I wouldn't blame them, right? With a lot of these programs. And so it's more than just soccer. There's a lot more to it. And so have you seen that as well? I mean, is that something that you're addressing as well with the initiative?
Yeah, so it's all aspects of the game: refereeing, coaching, playing, and I, if I'm not mistaken, a guest that you had in a prior episode was David Rika. And I think another part of this is just getting out there into the community. So David is our leader for Innovate to Grow grant, a grant from US Soccer. And what that's done is allowed us to just get proactive and get into the communities and let areas that aren't served by New Jersey Soccer know that we're out there. We were seeing thousands of new players come into the mix, and a lot of it is just saying, here's where we are. I think we know that at the end of the day, you need a good product. And I think that's what we've been building. So we let them know what we've offered. And as I mentioned, it was an exciting milestone earlier in this week to know that we went back over the 100,000 member mark, and just seeing growth year over year. And a lot of that is just, hard work and getting good programs. And as I mentioned, David, getting into these areas where we've never been and figuring out that strategy.
What does that look like? How we both know that the game over the last 30 years or so, maybe 20 especially, it's kind of gone to fever pitch. But basically, since I graduated from high school, it's become more and more professionalized, right? I mean, for lack of a better term, but it's just the professional coaches, it's the different DAs, ECNLs, a lot of these, just very high cost. And so the idea of the elite, not just in elite players, but also oftentimes it's hard to get the underprivileged to be able to afford it and to be able to pay for the cost of these things. So I assume part of that Innovate to Grow grant, as you're talking about getting to some of these places that are underserved, is part of that. But how can we make these high level youth sports, in this case soccer, obviously, more accessible for the low income, for the underprivileged youth that are in these places that they just simply can't afford $250 a month for dues and travel costs and being able to go to these different places. A friend of mine just texted me, in fact, this morning and said, hey, I gotta going to Kansas City for a game, and it's going to be $1,000 for one 80-minute game. And what are we doing? And that's the reality, right? So how can we make it more accessible, understanding that it does cost money to do these things?
Maryland Youth Soccer, and we look in just the nature, and I know this is a big part of what I do, is not trying to reinvent the wheel. There's so many great people and so many great programs. So they have a Let's Play initiative that we're taking a hard look at, because they introduced it into the schools and had a lot of success. A fully funded program for in a school system that otherwise couldn't have done that. So what we're going to do is look, and that was really the idea of US Soccer's Innovate to Grow grant, is test ideas and figure out what works to grow participation. So building upon that, we have a soccer outreach advisory board and trying to develop our own strategy of getting into some of these underserved areas and planting seeds. I think ultimately what I believe is that, with 100,000 members, 350 plus clubs, and 10,000 coaches, and our group in the state office of 10 or so, we're not going to be running programs, but it's developing that strategy. So if we can go into these areas, partner with the rec department, get the local officials involved, get the community engaged, train them, train the trainer type concepts, I think then that's where we have, what I think is the best chance for long-term success. We could always go into, an area, an urban area, run a program, run a training, but I don't see that as sustainable. I don't see that as making, long-term, change or growth. So that's a little bit into some real-time insight of what we're trying to navigate because of the stability, because of the growth, and because of the support from our board of directors. I think the next few years we'll anticipate and have the ambition to be much more aggressive in terms of getting soccer, making soccer available to those that don't have the means that, some communities where they do. Yeah. So beyond that, it's also just, continue to do what we do and control what we control, and do good work with delivering programs, tournaments, and just basic membership. We've been fortunate enough to keep our fees flat for a few years now. That's one piece of the puzzle, but it's part of the community effort.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I look forward to having you on again in a few years. Plan on doing this for a long time and be
Nice.
talking about the progress on these different things. That'll be fun to see that, as you said, real time, to be able to hear. And also that goes to this idea of collaboration. I mean, you talked about Maryland. I know in our previous conversation, we talked about a few of the other state associations that you're having conversations with to share ideas and say, hey, this is working, this isn't working. How important is that? Or how important should it be in your mind? And how is that something that I think we should emulate in everything that we do, as far as this idea of, as you said, not reinventing the wheel, but collaborating? And how hard is collaboration in reality?
I think it's probably another area that I'm spending my most time on, because I think you hit on it. It's the areas for biggest growth. And I'm 7 years in, as I mentioned, and I don't pretend to be the expert. There's been people involved in youth soccer far, far longer than I have, but maybe that also gives me a little bit of advantage because I'm not as influenced by history. And I look at it, and it's really hit me hard in recent years, is if we were starting from scratch, building soccer, I don't think it would be structured this way. There's 50 plus state associations, there's different governing bodies, and we know that soccer differs from state to state. Let me say that I think there's differences, but there's far more than that. There's many similarities. I mentioned the goal safety project. I mean, that was just one small example of how we can do what we do better, more efficiently, and deliver a better product. On another, what I think really captures the idea of collaboration, is we got together with other state associations, specifically Indiana, Ohio, and Tennessee, not states you'd normally think you'd collaborate with from New Jersey, just from a geography perspective. And we found this opportunity to align our marketing assets, and we contracted a group, SSEC, Sports Sponsorship and Event Consulting, and they're leveraging our commercial assets. So we know that the programs that we talk about, getting into those markets underserved and delivering programming, it needs that investment. And if we have those sponsors and those partners and donors, we'll be better able to do that. So we had that announcement maybe a month ago. And again, when we connect in a few years, I hope we'll have ways of showing that success. The other idea of collaboration, which is also something that motivates me. I'm really a fan of the collegiate setting, and I had a stint as an adjunct professor. So I engaged with the Global Sports Business Master's program at Rutgers. We're meeting virtually with the students every week and diving into this concept I just mentioned of alignment with other state association. And I think this is the future if we do it right. We align, we can improve the way we communicate, we market, streamline it, just be more efficient, more effective. And even a future one is, at least in New Jersey, is just align with the adult and referee associations. In youth soccer, or soccer, as you may know, but for audience may not, at least in New Jersey, there's 3 different associations. Ours really governs the youth. There's another ones for the referees, and the third one for the adults. Again, different markets, different needs, but I'd like to think far more similarities than differences. And if you kind of work through that, and I think it was your original question, it is much harder than it looks from the outside. And when I dig in, it takes a lot of effort, but I'm super vested in it because I just think it's the next phase to get us where we want to be.
Yeah, and I love so much about that answer. And there's 2 things in particular. One of the things, collaboration is hard. It's one of the things that I spend, most of my time doing. It's part of the reason I do this podcast, is to get people aware of each other, The reason I've done Think Orphan podcast for the last 6 years is to help people in the orphan care space get to know each other and be able to be aware of what each other are doing. That's one side of collaboration, but the harder part is that trust building, right? You're not going to collaborate if you don't trust each other, right? So the only way to build trust is to get to know each other, right? And I think what you hit on there is when I talked with one of my best friends, he's one of my mentors, and he does mediation in the Middle East. So, I mean, if you can do mediation in the Middle East, you can pretty much, you can figure things out, right? If we were talking about state soccer, so I think we can figure that out. And I said, how in the world do you do that? And he said, well, we just start with what we agree on.
Yeah.
And I come in and say, I'm a dad. Are you a dad? Yeah. Okay. Do you love your kids? Yeah, I love my kids. Oh yeah, so do I, and then you go from there. Right. And so I think we complicate it sometimes with trust building, and we think that we have to go to the core right away and make sure we agree on everything. The reality is there will be things we disagree on, but we agree on probably 95% of the things.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, in our world today, we tend to focus on the things we disagree on, and we go there first. So have you seen that as far as that side of it? I mean, I'm making some assumptions there, but the other thing I saw is you start on some small projects together to build that trust as well. But have you seen that, and have you seen success in that?
Yeah, when you were saying that, I found myself thinking that, when you work on collaboration, it's most successful when you have someone that you can connect with. And I think you mentioned some of the examples, the Middle East as an extreme, which is an incredible point. If you can get success there, everything else has to be easy by comparison. But, as I reach out within our network, and a lot of the reason for that collaboration I mentioned with SSEC on the sponsorship sales side was groups and individuals that, hey, we're thinking the same way. Now, differences are also healthy because, if everyone just agrees, and you don't get that counterpoint, you don't get that pushback that is healthy to fine tune and troubleshoot, so to speak. But it is a group that of individuals that we're having a similar philosophy, and that allows for that success. There's inherently less resistance when there's conflict. It's better to work through. So yeah, and that applies to our staff. When you're working together, it's better. It's at the home, when everyone's thinking similarly at home and has the same idea of what we want to do, things are better. So I think that point just goes across. It's not just thinking, finding someone that does everything you do, but has a healthy resistance, and finding that balance is really tough.
Absolutely. And that one of my favorite quotes of all time was Patrick Lencioni said, when there is trust, conflict becomes the search for truth. When there's no trust, conflict becomes politics, where someone has to be right and someone has to be wrong. And so there's that idea of healthy conflict really only happens when we have that trust built. Right. And so that healthy conflict that will happen with that disagreement, that's actually a very good thing when there's trust. When not, you usually end up saying, forget it, I'm not working with you. We're just going to go back to our states and do our own thing. But when you can build that trust, you'll be able to say, hey, we all have the same goals in mind. We want these kids to flourish. We want these kids to have fun. We want these kids to keep playing the game, right? So they can learn these things. So how can we do that together? And so I love hearing that from you. I want to.
The other thing, without being interrupted, but it's also compromise. I realize is another key word there, because it's like merger of companies, and I haven't been involved in that, but as we look at some of these ideas with different state associations, we said, and we kind of had these core ideas. And one of them that we came up with was compromise, because we all have our own way of doing something, whether that's at the work setting or in the house, of how you organize, put your clothes away, whatever that is. And if you're all going to get, swimming downstream in the same direction, there's going to have to be some give and take. And that's not always easy, to let go of what you feel, believe, or and kind of shift, so to speak, not necessarily give up on your ideals or change your core values, so to speak, but compromise is another word that just jumped to me as I listened to you and the perspective you shared.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully we can all find those win-wins if we can figure that out. But sometimes you're not able to get everything that you'd want. I just had The Office come to mind. I don't know if you watch The Office, but the win-win-win came to mind, and that was so there you go. You never know what you're gonna get here. My mind is a funny thing. So all right. So going back to something you talked about earlier, the referees. All right. So I ref. There's a referee association. Obviously, you're part of the initiative you're talking about with the G3 is raising up girl referees. My daughter, 13, starting to referee. I absolutely love it. She's having a blast and she's making some good money. But there is this other side of it, of referee abuse. That's been something that unfortunately is happening. There was out here in California. I don't know if you're aware of that. I'm sure you are, but the referee that got assaulted by a dad who, ended up going to court. And I don't know exactly what happened out of that, but, what does that tell us when we see this, I don't know if it's the cauldron of the youth sports, of how it's become this pressure cooker. But what does it tell us about our parents, our youth, the game, and the youth sports in general, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, it's a massive issue, and reality is we've seen an uptick on alleged referee abuse and assault in the last 2 years, and we think about it. Why is that? Is it the stresses of the pandemic? Probably some truth to that. That's probably one component. And I wish this were easier to solve, and I don't think there is a quick fix. And I think it goes back to one hand is culture, and we got to address that. I also feel, and I'll be honest, I kind of have to point a finger at myself at times, is I think parents are probably too involved in the game themselves. With soccer specifically, I think parents generally know more, because more often than not, the numbers of parents who played the game at my age versus when I was a kid playing is significantly different. But I don't think they let, I think there's the great Manny Shellshite. I watched his documentary. If you're familiar with Manny, he said, "Let the game be the teacher," and it's hard. I think parents, as a parent myself, you want to help your kid, and you want to find the answer and tell them what to do. But and I work hard. I think I'm do an okay job with it when I'm fortunate enough to be a spectator, not a coach. I just want to keep my mouth shut. The kids don't need 50 people telling them what to do, when to kick, and when to do. They need to figure things out, and it's probably a cultural thing to want to be involved. And then when you get involved and other people get involved, then it kind of can escalate. But I in thinking about that, I look back and I realize how lucky I was, and I give my parents a ton of credit. First they were. My mom was at essentially every game through college, even through college, and traveling back and forth from New Jersey to Boston and wherever we were playing. My dad was there a ton, and they never got involved. As I think about it, I almost never heard them other than a positive comment on the sideline, and that allowed me to focus, enjoy the game, and never get distracted. I don't think that happens the same way as much as we'd like if we can wave our magic wand. And the referees often bear the brunt of this dynamic. And we know it's an issue. My son has started to do refereeing as in the local club on the rec side. And I hope he continues in his training to become a referee. I've gotten to know some of the individuals in the referee community, and I am, as a whole, just so impressed by who they are. And I'm sure that's their training, their composure, their presentation, their maturity, their decision making. Decision making is just an incredibly important skill. And one gentleman in our office, Ryan Foley, he was a national level youth referee. And I have to imagine all of those skills that I mentioned came from his time as a referee and what's driving his success now as a professional, moving on from refereeing. So the refereeing as an activity is just so incredibly valuable. And I think, we'll have to educate. I think that's a key thing of what we can do, because I think sometimes on the sidelines, people are yelling and don't really know what they're saying. So parent education is a huge part. I think accountability is a big word that comes to mind. And the last word is respect, because I think that's probably the core of this. If there were more respect, we wouldn't have these types of issues. So, again, something that we'll roll out is our own little respect campaign, just to try to, talk about the positive stuff. We know the problems, but it's a complicated issue, and it's not going to be solved overnight. But I think there's a lot of people in youth soccer and probably all sports that are focused on it, because this current trend isn't sustainable in terms of the number of referees and people wanting to get out there, and we need them.
I agree. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm helping out reffing because they need them. Right.
Yeah.
And there's a massive shortage. And I've told people after reffing 8-year-old, 9-year-old games, I said every parent should be required to referee an 8-year-old or 9-year-old game and just
Yeah.
hear what it feels like for those 8 and 9-year-old kids to be on the middle of that field, hearing it from their coaches on one side and the parents on the other side, like you said, just yelling stuff.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, the referees get stuff too, but I'm a 47-year-old man. I can take it, but a lot of these kids don't. And that's why they quit. And a lot of these younger adults are like, forget this. I can go and not get yelled at all the time and go make money somewhere else. And so, that's something that I really look at and go, they're, like you said, it's not something that's going to be solved overnight. But one of the things that I've seen a lot of people trying to do is having the silent sideline thing,
Yeah.
which I don't think works personally because people are going to say stuff. So I'd rather focus on how can we encourage people and teach people to say things better, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because we know people are going to talk. So how can we encourage that side of it? And again, like you said, it's not going to be solved overnight. I think the polarization and the people just yelling at everybody about everything in our society is bled over to literally everything we do. But
And not,
I don't know. Have you seen any successes in any of those things?
what I've personally done, and it's not practical to do for every game that occurs because there's God knows how many games in a given weekend in the spring season or fall season. But when we host our state finals for our state cups, I've taken it upon myself, and our staff does it, and we talk to parents before the game on the sideline. And some of the messages, and I think it's going to change, but the messages have been, one, congratulations, thanks for what you do. We know parents are key to letting the kids participate in these state tournaments and succeed and have these opportunities. And then I say, let's be honest with each other. The next, 80 minutes or 90 minutes, whatever age group you got, the next two halves of the game, there's going to be mistakes that go on behind us. And I point to the field and I say, there's going to be mistakes by the players. I think everyone accepts that players make mistakes, probably the coaches and the referees. They're going to make mistakes. That's part of it.
Yep.
I don't get into the fact that they don't have VAR and, the complexity of being a referee, but I think part of it is accepting mistakes. It bothers me that we seem to accept a player making a mistake because they'll do that. You miss a goal, you miss a sitter. That happens. Yep. But why can't a referee make a mistake? And you might give answers to it. I don't really accept that because a lot of them are young referees learning as well. So, that's one way of getting people individually. But, reality is there's more than 100,000 parents and I'm going to have individual conversations. But it does make me feel good when I have that ability to influence and talk to people. I hope it's had some impact. And at least for our state cups, we've been managed in recent years to avoid major drama, and maybe part of it is just setting the right tone. So that's one tactic that can't be done, but it's felt good.
Absolutely. No, and I think that is something that it can be done in more games if we train up our coaches in the same thing. And I think that that's something that it does take time, it does take energy, it does take effort, but if we really see it as a priority, I think we will. Because otherwise it's going to get worse. If we're not addressing it and we just let it go, I think it is going to get worse because people just get more and more freedom. The ones that are going to do that, I think will feel more freedom if in fact, I just did an episode recently about, slurs from the crowd that, we had a parent yell something from the crowd and I turned around as a coach and said, hey, there's none of that right now. There's none of that. There's no business being here. And, things like that in the moment, but you can do that. But I think if we can just train up people to do more and more, and like you said, referees are going to make mistakes. The reality, I had a referee on here toward the beginning of the podcast talking about angles. I mean, we know in life how you see something depends on your angle, depends on your perspective, depends on your worldview, depends on who you are. The reality is in these games, these referees could be blocked by 3 people to see a foul. And they're not going to call it if they don't, especially if in the box. If they don't see it, they're not going to call it. You can't call. That's what I had these kids yelling at me the other day, and I said, look, if I call it, I'll see it. I mean, if I see it, I'll call it. And if I call it, I'll see it, I guess, too. But, if I see it, I'll call it. Like, I get your frustration if you think something's happening to you, but if I see it, I'll call it.
Right.
And on that kind of diffused the situation, right? Didn't mean they didn't yell at me throughout the whole thing, whatever. But I think it's becoming the norm that you're yelling at refs rather than, hey, if it's a really bad thing or if someone's getting hurt, like that's the time I could see the intensity and the passion go. But anyway, I love that you're doing that even at the state cup, because that's a start, right? And that's a start that we can do. So, all right. So a few more questions. You alluded to this earlier, but you've learned a ton from the game. I know, because we've had the conversation. And I know because you played soccer and you're leading something in soccer now. So I have no doubt that you're using some of the lessons you learned from playing soccer in what you're doing today with New Jersey Youth Soccer and when you worked with the MLS as well. We'll get to your parenting and your marriage here in a little bit, but what are some just a couple lessons that you've taken from the game itself that you're using in your leadership in New Jersey Youth Soccer?
Yeah, I think leadership's kind of a constant learning process, and I every now and then even read some books or try to pick up some things because it's so important. It's really challenging, and I really look at myself often and see how I'm doing, again, both at home and at work. And I think about, in terms of what I've learned, an impression from, ironically, high school. So, turn back the clock, so to speak. And my sophomore year was part of a really talented soccer team that was successful, made it to the finals in the counties before losing in overtime, double overtime, actually. And we came back the next year in junior year, and we lost the majority of our starters. And on paper, there was no chance to repeat that success. Fast forward, even a better season, win the county tournament against a higher seeded team after going 2 goals down. And you kind of say, okay, well, how does that happen? And if we go back to leadership, no doubt, one, our coach, Bill Jager, he did something special, and how he managed the group. And that's a subtlety that I is tougher to decipher. But I also think about one of our captains, a man, Ted Flagetis, who's a college coach, as I understand now. And he was, as most captains in high schools would be, a really special talent. And he was our number 10. But that's not really what sticks out. I mean, when I think about him, it was his personality. It was his presence. And I don't know that I've ever played with or against a more driven competitor, a fierce, personality. And even 30 years later, I can still feel that he never quit. And I think that exuded. I mean, I don't remember it consciously, but I gotta figure he led by example, and we as teammates, I think, subconsciously fed off of that. So there was, you just need, when you have a leader, you just gravitate to, and you kind of learn from. And it was, when I think about leadership, ironically, he's just one of those people I think about, and there's so many people, and I've had great mentors. Ivan Gazidis, who went on to with MLS and then went on to Arsenal, Nelson Rodriguez, so many incredible people over the years. But ironically, I think about, my captain from high school. So funny story, but you learn what you learn.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, all right. So now I always love this question because I just never know what people are going to say. But what lessons have you learned directly from the game of soccer that you've applied to your marriage, your parenting, and any other relationships outside the game that are close personal relationships?
Ironically, there's so much to learn from soccer. And I mentioned the documentary I watched of Manny Schultzite, and talk about the teacher, the game being the teacher. And when I growing up, it was just so simple. I enjoyed competition and wanted to be on the field, but there's so much more to it. As I more recently listening to folks that we've engaged in youth soccer through webinars, through clinics, through events. Tony Miola, Tab Ramos, John Harks, Carly Lloyd, Yael Averbush West, Aleko Eskandarian. I mean, New Jersey's pretty fortunate that there's a pretty incredible history. And I've gotten a chance to listen to them all talk in different capacities. And what is not lost. I mean, I try to remind my family and my kids, because they made such an impression. They were all incredible talents, but the key that they all talk about was they worked, they practiced, they had an ethic and a drive that was stronger than the next talented player. And that's why they got to the level that they did. So, we watch a game, it always, looks easy for those that are, at the top level of talent, but what we don't see in all likelihood is all the work that got them there. And, so soccer, is more so looking back, realize that it's about hard work and commitment and, earning what you want, not just expecting it to come to you. And even more recently, I started playing soccer again with an over 40 men's team. And that's been a shocking learning experience, because now I need to work differently. I just need to work so I can get through the game. And
that's right.
And it's also the relationships and the leadership. I mean, it's talk about mistakes. You can imagine how many mistakes go on the field for us, but it's not getting down on teammates, and it, because there's more mistakes, I feel that we need to be more supportive and be more of a team. It's guys going out there looking to have a good time, use that as, their outlet, their fun, to get out some of their energy, be healthy. So amazingly, I find myself thinking about these lessons in soccer as much now as I did, and probably more so than I did 30 years ago, but the game keeps teaching.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that idea of you're always going to be working hard if you're going to be successful, but we need to be more creative in what that hard work looks like sometimes. Sometimes it's not just going out and just going as hard as you possibly can all the time, because you'll burn out. Right. And that's a great lesson from it too, that, you need to have, different things to keep your mind, going as well. So it's not just playing soccer really, really hard. You got to have friends. You got to have life, as you said, those friendships, or, you're going to burn out. The vast majority of people, if it's just continual going out and doing drills and training and just constant soccer, you're going to burn out. Right. There's that handful that maybe won't, but so I'm not, somebody's going to email me and say, hey, I did that and I loved it, and now I'm playing pro somewhere. Okay. Yeah. There are those outliers, but for the most part, how can we make it? How can we encourage? How can we understand too, that, part of the game of playing the over 40 league is getting out and getting exercise. Yeah. And that's success, right? If I always, it wasn't a joke. It was my success for the over 35 league here was, if I can get home and not have to scrub out the little black pellets from the turf out of my knee, and I got some exercise, that's a successful night, So, some guys are still like playing like it's World Cup, and that's their thing, and I'm not going to argue with them necessarily, but yeah. So I love that idea of just hard work is the constant, but understand that, what is your gauge for success? All of those go into the hard work, and understand that there is a time for rest, right? There is a time for taking off, right? I mean, I again, don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'll spare you what I deem success at the end of Sunday's game, and whether I can get up the next day. But the honest answer is it's created a little bit of drive to work to get, to a place that I want to be. Not that I want to try to match my 21-year-old self, but it's given me some motivation to challenge myself. And as I learned from those names I mentioned, Aleko and Harks and Carly, Carly, as much as anybody we know, I mean, her work ethic is arguably unmatched. I'm not going to try to match it, but it gives me a little drive to recognize that, hey, let me challenge myself and see how far I can, I can get.
Absolutely. All right. Last question we have for everybody. And you've talked about a couple things that you've watched or read or listened to, but is there anything you haven't mentioned so far that you've read, watched, or listened to that's impacted your thinking on how soccer explains life and leadership?
Yeah. So do you know are you familiar with the great Danny Rojas?
Oh yeah, of
Football is
course.
life. You
Of
know where I'm
course.
going with this?
Of course. Yeah.
So my wife and I have now completed Ted Lasso, I think 2 seasons through, watching it twice. And the entertainment is just incredible, and it's actually even a little bit more. There's just this great wisdom that comes across.
Yep.
And we've talked a lot, and I know this is about leadership, and we know that Coach Ted benched Jamie Tard, star player, because he wasn't playing as a good teammate, and he showed leadership. We know how the story worked out. Yes, it's scripted, but hey, great story and great lesson. And if I reflect upon what I need to take about that, and I know it, I remind our staff, I don't succeed. I can't talk about what New Jersey Youth Soccer is doing with you without the we of our team, our staff, our board of directors, the 9,000 coaches, the 350 clubs. The list goes on and on. I mean, it's a community and it's genuine. And that's why that idea of collaboration, that we talked about, is so important to me. So, that team first attitude that Ted, Coach Lasso puts forth is something that's core, that I never lose sight of. And I also reflect my early days in MLS. We had a lunch with our department, and our leader that I mentioned, Ivan Gazidis, who's went on to the CEO roles with Arsenal and AC Milan, and just an incredible mentor and person, a supervisor for me. I got really lucky. He said something along the lines of, at one of those lunches, that thank you for all that you do that makes me look good and makes my job look easy. And that's the rough quote. And it didn't really make sense to me at the time. A few years into my job, I'm like, well, you do what you do, I do what I do. I don't understand how it relates, but it in hindsight, it does resonate. So again, I'm talking about good things of New Jersey soccer, growth of over 100,000. And it's, I know I'm one piece of a puzzle, and I try to influence as much as I possibly can on any given day. But it's the collective we, and Ted has so many awesome quotes, that I could probably share at each of our staff meetings and learn something. He mentioned some initiatives, and one that I share and even share with my family every now and again is a quote that I write down, so I remember it, is taking on a challenge is a lot like riding a horse, isn't it? If you're comfortable while you're doing it, you're probably doing it wrong.
Yep.
Now, I don't think my delivery will ever come close. And I think if we had Ted Lasso here, he'd certainly have it come across in a better way. But it's something that, we talked in the beginning. I share that with staff, to interns, when I guest lecture to my kids, and I don't say it enough, it's convey it effectively, but it's about the idea of getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Life isn't easy. Work isn't always easy. School isn't always easy, but I find myself thinking and learning and seeing those out there, that when you can handle adversity and thrive through a challenge, those are the successful people 9 times out of 10. So, Ted continues to entertain and teach us, and we're pretty much ready for season 3.
Absolutely. And that's why we actually, I don't know if you're aware of this, we have the we have the halftime talk and the post-match show, whatever. We did 5 shows of the leadership lessons from Ted Lasso, and it's for that very reason, that it absolutely is. It's just chock full of the leadership lessons. I think season 1 more than season 2, because I think they went to more character development in season 2. Yeah. But no, it's still a phenomenal season, but just I think a little bit different from the leadership lesson standpoint. That being said, so many good things, like you said, about comfortable. I always talk about the fact that most of the great things in life happen just on the other side of comfortable, right? Mm-hmm. And if we really can understand that, I think it's key. The other thing you said that I just think of certain players on the field. You look at a holding midfielder, most of what they're doing is behind the scenes. Most of what they're doing is the things that they work so hard to do to make other people's job look easy. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why a lot of the great holding midfielders out there, if you're not a football / soccer fan, you wouldn't even know about them. Right. Sergio Busquets, the Michael Carricks, these different people that are incredible, but they're not household names, right? And I think there's so many of those in companies. I mean, that from New Jersey Youth Soccer, right? You're at the executive director, your name's on whatever, but there are so many people doing what they do incredibly well to make what you're doing, better. And I'm not going to say look easy, because from what I've heard, it doesn't sound easy to me, and I don't think it looks easy to others, but it is something that it can't happen without that. Right. And that's why I think soccer is such a beautiful, microcosm of these other organizations in the world, because it is a weak link sport. You're only as strong as your weakest link. And I think that's how our companies are as well. And so anyway, thanks again, Evan, for being a part of this show. Thanks for doing what you're doing. Thanks for working hard to make this game more fun and more accessible and more loved and more have more retention, so that these boys and girls can learn the life lessons that they'll use as men and women. So thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for giving us the chance to talk about it and share, and likewise appreciate all that you're doing to promote the game.
Absolutely. All right, folks. Well, thanks again for being a part of this. Thank you for your download. Thanks for engaging this conversation, because we couldn't do it without you, and we wouldn't want to do it without you. So on that note, if you haven't done so already, join the Facebook group, How Soccer Explains Leadership. Drop me an email if you have any thoughts or questions, or if you want more information about any of the things that we're doing. You can check out all of the things we referenced in this conversation on the show notes. I'll have the links to New Jersey Youth Soccer and the Growing the Games initiative, and the Growing the Girls game initiative, and all these different things that they're doing. If you have any questions about those, you can connect with them on that. And again, as we've mentioned before, we have the Coaching the Bigger Game program that I'm working on with Christian DeVries. If you're interested in that, coachingthebiggergame.com. The Warrior Way Soccer program that Paul and Marcy Jobson are doing as well, warriorwaysoccer.com. So with all of that, hope you're having a great day, and I hope that you're taking everything that you're learning from this show. You're using it to be a better leader, a better spouse, a better parent, a better friend, and you're continually reminding yourself that soccer does explain life and leadership. Thanks a lot. Have a great week.